Practicing Happy number 15. Look at us, middle of the double digits here.
This is crazy. 15 of these things?
15 of these things. Look at us sticking to a thing. It's great.
I've never stuck to anything in my life, except for having a kid, which I don't have a choice, you know?
Yeah, you're right on in there.
So.
Clock's ticking. Just another 17 years, right?
Yeah. Well, and we're going to hit the reset button at some point.
Yeah, and then modern parenting, just another 27 years.
Yeah.
So, what I want to talk about today is the idea of deserving. What do we deserve based on what we do and who we are and those sorts of things?
Admittedly, I'm guilty of this one a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I'm always sitting around like, well, I don't really deserve to derp.
Yeah. We have this idea that if we have pleasant things in our life, then we have to have done something to deserve them.
Mm-hmm.
Or if an unpleasant thing is happening in our life, the question that arises, like, what have I done to deserve this? I couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
That idea can really get in the way of a practice of being a happy human being, because more often than not, it's not actually helping anything. So a lot of cognition can go on there that doesn't actually contribute to the project of furthering your well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, from what I've seen, a trap in sort of two directions. One of which I seem to be somewhat immune to, so happy days there, but I've definitely seen a lot of people struggling with it, so I feel...
Hopefully I can give context on that.
Yeah, right? The first way that this ends up being a trap that I've seen is the idea that I deserve X can be used to sort of cut you off from any joy in what you've already got going on. Aristotle told us 2,000 plus years ago, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
It's like, I deserve to have better than this, therefore I'm not able to really experience what I have right here.
Yeah, that's a pretty common one for me. More recently it came up just yesterday. Actually, I was sitting thinking like, I was looking at taking account what some of my buddies got going on the next few weeks, and I was like, I wish I could do those things, but I never have a Sunday off.
Mm-hmm.
And then that narrative sprung into my mind, like, I deserve to have weekends off sometimes, and I never do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start, then a whole like loadout gets processed in of like, well, you don't have weekends off on occasion because X, Y, and Z happen, and X, Y, and Z is your fault, and all of a sudden, I'm in a mindset of negative thinking, and I've got to like pull myself out of the hangman's noose, so to speak.
Yeah.
And upon reflection later on, it was like, actually, I do take weekends off on occasion.
Yeah. That's the best part, right? Is how this can get started about things that aren't even true.
Yeah. But I sat there thinking like, I deserve to have these things without really, having the mindfulness to be aware that like, yeah, and you do have those things on occasion. You have some other benefits that people don't have, and that you can also take Tuesday, Wednesday off in the middle of the week when nobody's out to compete with you for resources. So
yeah, get all those errands done.
Right.
And actually go to a bank while they're open.
I can go to Costco and not run the risk of, being trampled or stampeded in any fashion. So so I see how that gets people.
Yeah, and it's always worth commenting on how ready that entire follow-up narrative is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The moment the door opens, yeah, I deserve this, and then it's how quickly does it go to, and it's really all your fault.
Yeah.
So not only are you not getting the things that you deserve, but you deserve to not be getting the things. Right? Which brings us into the other side of this trap, right? Which is like, I don't actually deserve the good things that I have because I have some negative self-image, and so I'm going to punish myself by denying myself these good things. And in some way, that's going to make me the right person.
I don't have experience with that one. I have to be honest. I'm that guy who's always like, I deserve X, I deserve more and more and more.
Yeah. I think we both fall on that side of this particular one. I've known people who struggle deeply though with this very issue. They have that negative self-image. They have this sense that I'm a bad person because I've done these things, or I'm a bad person because I believe these things, or what have you, whatever frame they've been trained to put their experience in that reflects poorly on them. And then the cycle of punishment begins, where it's, I have to deny myself all these good things, and in denying myself all these good things, I'm going to be miserable, and that's going to contribute to making bad decisions, which feed this narrative in the first place.
Can it be? Can it be? I haven't. Can the same thinking or same like thought process apply to like I haven't earned these things?
Yeah, I feel like that's what probably underpins it.
You know, because I experience that one pretty frequently where I'm like, well, I would like more of this, and I'm like, well, what have you done to like go out and what effort have you put into making that a thing?
Yeah, yeah. That can be a healthy counter narrative
Sure.
to I deserve better than this. Well, what have you really done to deserve better than this, right? That can be a starting place if that's the narrative that really traps you.
Yeah.
Just a little counterweight, just to nudge you back in a more sensible direction. But, we're going to try to step out of this entire paradigm if we can.
I think one thing that springs to mind readily too when I'm talking about deserving things, is that it's helpful to, again, we talk about this again and again about having like map markers or thresholds to like kind of like judge on, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that what I reflect on a lot is like I'm square either in the middle or the upper tier of what things could be, you know.
Mhm.
Like I live in like the most powerful nation in the world with access to some of the best medical, like my
Yeah.
life, my quality of life is relatively amazing compared to a lot of the world.
Yeah.
Um,
If
you
you're an
know, so
American, you're one of the richest human beings who've ever lived, no matter where you are in our social strata.
yeah, exactly. And so like I get to thinking about like less and more and deserving and not deserving, and I think like, well,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolute rather than relative perspective is often a helpful starting place, right? Anytime
right.
you hear anything doing a comparison to try to make you feel bad, stepping back and going, well,
Can
let's
we
think
go?
about human
Can we go
history.
really Can we go really out there and be like, well, but there's probably other universes and planets that have it way worse than this planet, you
I
know?
you know I actually spent a lot of time there. Have you ever seen Carl Sagan's pale blue dot image?
Yes.
Right, that's the kind of pull out that I try to do. And I find
Right.
that really helpful. It's just, really we're on this tiny speck floating in an infinite and indifferent universe.
Yeah. Totally.
If I could be teleported to a random location in the universe, I would die painfully instantly. Right?
Which brings us back to the point, like, we're on the pale blue dot. What do we really deserve and not
Yeah.
deserve?
Yeah, we've already got it very, very good. But we can try to have it as good as possible. We
Yeah.
can try to do things to take care of us, and this entire bundle of cognition doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And the other problem with it, so there are those two different traps, right? Either I don't deserve good things or I deserve better, which is really two sides of the same coin. It just depends on which, those attacks both lead to the same place. It's which one is your mind more vulnerable to, that's the one you'll end up with. Then we move into an interpersonal realm. So then we're talking about other people and what they deserve.
Right.
And then that opens up a whole realm of negative
I feel like
possibilities.
I feel like that one gets nastier.
Uh-huh. It
Like that
absolutely
person
does.
deserves, bad things to happen to them, or they deserve, yeah. You start thinking about what people deserve, and you can get to bad places real quickly.
Yeah. And it enters into sort of this old style notion of justice.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm thinking about.
A lot of people in our society think about justice as a social phenomenon, a big sort of snapshot of a society.
Hmm.
That's, social justice, very popular. And that's pretty modern idea. If you look at, if that's your cup of tea, if you're interested in that, you got to read John Rawls' Theory of Justice. But we're talking not about justice as a big social phenomenon, but justice as a relationship between individual human beings, which is how it was conceived of in antiquity, for example. And so if you look at even like the dialogues of Plato, there are two different types of justice narratives running in there, where you have the very old school justice is doing good things for my friends and bad things to my enemies.
Yeah.
That's tribal almost, right? If you're in my group, I do good things for you. If you're outside of my group, I do bad things to you. And that's just the reality of scraping by as a hunter-gatherer, right? And you see this movement away from that towards I should do to each person as they deserve. I should do good things for good people and bad things for bad people.
That's kind of dangerous too.
It is kind of dangerous too, but it is sort of the foundation of the institutions that we've built then, right? So, if you are industrious and hardworking, then you should be rewarded with success in our society, and if you're, criminal or slack or lazy, then you should be impoverished or you should be imprisoned or all of these sorts of things, right? There's this idea that underlies all of that, which is that it's appropriate to dole out different experiences to different people based upon their past history as judged by some framework. There's a lot of utility in that idea. It's certainly better than the ideas it supplanted, and it didn't fully supplant them, but, in sort of educated circles, it mostly supplanted that sort of thing. But it's still, from the perspective of an individual trying to be a happy human being, that's still a dangerous idea to subscribe to, because it creates a tremendous opportunity for our choices about who we are to be negated.
Right.
So, I want to be a person who helps other people be happy. But if I believe that bad people should have bad things happen to them, and I see somebody over there who, according to my assessment, is a bad person, then how do I behave towards that person?
Probably in a bad way.
Some sort of negative fashion, right? Because I've got to punish them. And so I've changed how I interact with the world based upon my conception of this other person. And we've talked a lot about how it's really difficult to have a full and rich conception of another person. We don't really know what's going on inside their head. There's this it's a well-known bias, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but we tend to attribute our own failings to extenuating circumstances and other people's failings to intrinsic qualities of their being.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the classic, I'm having a hard day, you're being difficult, Steve's an asshole. For the same set of behaviors.
Yeah, I think that also goes hand in hand with the whole, we judge other people on their actions and us on our intentions.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, being unkind doesn't feel good. That's not a good experience. There's a lot of truth to the notion that really what you put out into the world is what you get back. It gets reflected back to you, right? So if I'm a jerk to this person over here because I think they're a bad person, their conception of themselves probably doesn't include I'm a bad person. They're just having a rough day.
Sure.
Right? Or a rough life. There are extenuating circumstances we're not aware of. But now they look at us and it's like, well, that guy's an asshole.
Yeah.
Because he did this thing to me. And we create these nice feedback loops of mutual immiseration.
Yeah.
And that's no good, right? And to do this, to accomplish this, what that means is we have to continuously evaluate everybody in our social network. Everybody we come into contact with, we have to make the judgment: is this person a good person or a bad person? Is this a person that I should be nice to or that I should be mean to? And that's a lot of work. That's a lot of overhead, right? So instead of trying to dole out to each person their just desserts, we can actually just decide in advance how we want to interact with our fellow human beings and not have to do all that work.
Totally.
And have a more positive life experience, right? So I'm going to try to be as kind as I can to every person I meet. I try to make their day better. It doesn't matter if they're a jerk or not. And in fact, and this is a point, my man JC made, I especially want to be kind to somebody who's being a jerk, because that's the person who needs it the most. That's a person who's not living in an experience of kindness right now. That's why they're behaving that way.
Yeah, and you don't want to perpetuate that.
Don't want to perpetuate that, want to create the opportunity for them to experience something outside of that. The line from the New Testament on that is the doctor comes not to the healthy, but to the sick. That's one of my favorite lines of all time. It's so smooth. And that's like a clap back, right? That's like the Pharisees are trying to catch out Jesus. He's just nailing them over and over again.
He's tricky, that Jesus.
Yeah. He rocks his rhymes right on time.
Mm-hmm.
The advantages to this sort of approach, where we just decide, this is who I am, this is how I'm engaging with the world, and it doesn't matter who other people are. We completely get rid of that difficulty of the fact that we can't track other human beings in much detail anyway, because we don't need to track them in any sort of detail to know exactly what we're doing. We're going to be as kind as we can to them in every interaction.
And that's so hard to do. It's so hard to like rework your framework because like you're accustomed to just moving through your day, like making like compromises and taking and giving in your interactions with people based on what you think, what your loadout is of what the situation is.
Yeah, and of who those people are, right? We make
Yeah.
these snap judgments, and we know from reflecting on it that those snap judgments can't be accurate. There's too much information we're missing, but we're so trained to make them continuously about everyone around us that it happens unconsciously, and we change our behavior, we change who we are, we change what we're putting out into our social network, and therefore what we're going to get fed back based upon these judgments that have to be wildly inaccurate. There's just no way we can be accurately assessing anybody according to any framework. So we don't bother with it. You know? It's like this is a project which is doomed to failure. Let's not participate. Just step right outside of it. We give up all of that cognitive overhead of tracking everyone else's adherence to our personal code of what you should and shouldn't do and what rewards you should reap or punishments you should receive based upon that. We have simplified decision making. If
Yeah.
it's as simple as, you know what, I'm just going to be as kind and generous as I can because that's the sort of human being that I want to be, we have a consistent project. We can always then immediately sort of have a sense of measure of our day because there are no excuses. If I was unkind to somebody, there's not a whole debate now about, well, did they deserve that? Did I deserve the way they behaved towards me? It's just, oh yeah, that sucks that happened, right? I can think about the circumstances to come to some self-knowledge. What was it about that circumstance that led me to deviate from my project, that took me outside of the experience that I want to be creating in the world?
Right. I have a question about that.
Yeah.
What do you do in the situation where, you know, you're approaching a situation of be kind, be generous, but somebody is actively trying to do harm to other people's?
Well, you try to help the other people as best you can, and
Yeah.
you try to help that person see a different way of going about things. That's the challenge of the project of being a happy human being, right? Is that it requires us to be attentive to the detail of our lives in a way that a lot of the systems we buy into don't. There's the reason why it's so important to get rid of all these other types of cognitive overhead, is so that we got all of our resources at play, because we have to assess every single circumstance as an individual experience of the universe, right? We can't make up rules in advance
Right.
that we can apply unthinkingly, right? We have to be engaged with our experience in order to discern what's called for in the moment, right? We can make up guidelines for ourselves. This is what I want to do, right? This is what I'm aiming for, but figuring out exactly what is the kind, the compassionate approach in any given moment, that is going to be tricky, and that's going to require us to be present to our experience in a way that we might not be accustomed to.
I think that's something I didn't have in my toolkit until now, was to like really challenge myself to maintain that worldview that like, okay, each situation, start from scratch. What is the
Hmm.
kind and generous thing to do? What propagates like a happy human existence for everybody involved?
When you get good at it, and it's like anything, it's so much easier and it's so much nicer. Like, people really, really like you when you're consistently just trying to do your best to be nice to them, right? Like, it just facilitates everything in your experience. Life is so much easier because people are like, oh yeah, I know what that person's about.
Hmm.
I can form a reasonable expectation about that person, and there's almost nowhere to anchor a story that's negative about that person.
Right.
And there's the other thing, which is, sometimes you're going to fall short of it, and that's fine, and you can be transparent about that, and just let people know, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, I fell short, I'm sorry. Hey, sorry I snapped at you right there, I wasn't really in an attentive space right there, and this is what I'm working on to make that not happen again. People really respond positively to that, in my experience. You
You're
gotta be
right.
careful to not let that an excuse to continuously be a dick. um, you know, Sometimes I struggle with that one a lot. A lot of my very combative personality, the way that I was brought up, so that for me is a struggle. If somebody catches me off guard, or if I'm like really tired, or you know, in some other way not 100%, I can get into this really curt way of being real quick, and the razor tongue comes out, and I'm like, oh man, I should have just walked away right there. I didn't have anything nice to say right there. Should have just walked away. But
I think contextually it's okay to have a little fun too. Like,
yeah,
I'm still gonna rip on my friends and say mean things to them, in the context that like we're doing it to have fun with each other, which is
yeah, as long
overall
as
a kindness to our social group.
as long as everybody understands that what the rules of the game are, and everybody's acting in good faith, sure. I'm never gonna be the sort of person who's just like, yeah, hey, everybody, let's be really kind to each other, right? Like, there's always gonna be a bit of a cut and thrust in my social interactions. That's how I was raised. That's who I am. That's how I bond with people, right? I express my affection for people by a little bit of ribbon.
Yeah.
And that's a different thing, right? Because that helps sort of define this intimate circle where everybody understands what's going on here, and everybody understands that that's coming from a well-natured place, right? That's very different from some stranger who you've known for 30 seconds on the street, right? And they say something that maybe doesn't jibe with how you feel they ought to be interacting with you, and you start throwing out the insults and whatnot. That's a very different thing. And that is another example of, you really have to be cognizant of your situation. You really have to be present for your experience to know exactly what's at play, what the interaction is. And another thing that I want to talk about here, of course, is that this sort of attitude, right, this sort of I'm just going to decide who I am, really removes your dependence on other people behaving themselves.
Yeah, which is great.
What you get up to over the course of your day socially interacting with people isn't contingent upon them fitting some mold that you have for how people should interact. I remember working at Starbucks, I had a shift supervisor, the one who didn't particularly care for me for a couple months there, but he had this entire notion of politeness, and as soon as somebody didn't adhere to that, he was just derailed. He was mad, he was having a bad day, right? And, we're in an area where we got a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different expectations about interaction with people in a professional context, and a lot of different language skills, right? So people would come in who didn't really understand the social niceties of like American English, and he would greet them and he would expect them to respond in a certain way, and they wouldn't, and then he would just go off.
Yeah, and then, everybody else is determining how his day is going.
Yeah. And it's always a bad idea. Always a bad idea to make other people responsible for your behavior, for your state of mind, for your sense of well-being, because other people, broadly, if they're not actively trying to be malicious, they're probably being thoroughly thoughtless.
Yeah, totally.
That's just the unfortunate state of affairs. That's what
they're worried about. They're worried about what they deserve.
Yeah,
right then.
Among other things, they are lost in a sea of non-productive cognition and acting unconsciously, and that will, if you stake your happiness, your well-being on their behavior, you're gonna have a bad time, right? So all in all, it just removes a bunch of impediments to practicing being a happy human being, right? You don't have the overhead, you don't have the dependency, you don't have to condition your behavior on other people's behavior. Suddenly you've got all of this free mental resources and this consistent plan of behavior that gets you sent on the right track there. So deserving, it's not a good project. Give it up. Let's go beyond justice. Let's just go to, there's a human being over there, I'm going to be as kind as I can.
Yep. And again, it's a great way to live your life. It's a great way to I feel like if I can do that every day, if I wake up and I treat people that way every day, that's enough, right? You can lead a happy and full life, and just know that in every interaction I had, I did my very best to make other people happy, and I left a positive impact on the world in that way.
Now, there are a couple of, it's walking on the razor's edge as always. There's a couple of cautions there, right? You can't make your happiness contingent on anybody else's happiness.
Right.
You can be as kind as you can to them, as generous as you can, as giving as you can, but you have very little influence on what's going on inside their head.
Totally.
you can see somebody and smile and say, "Hey, how's it going? You know, I hope you're having a great day," and they might take that as you patronizing them, or you know, any number of things, and get mad at you. And it's like,
Often that's how they would take it if you just encountered a random person on the street.
oh
They're
yeah,
like, hey, how's your day going? Hope you're doing great. And like, oh, that guy's a fucking prick.
right. So, so you have to be, you know, you have to be aware. Don't go overboard. Don't get so saccharine that people think you're being sarcastic. But also just understand that you got to come from a well-meaning place. You got to be as kind as you can, and then you have to let go. And if somebody else is having some unfortunate experience and they persist in having some unfortunate experience, you have to, that's unfortunate. You know, I'll be present for opportunities to help you with that, and if there's no door open for that, then all I'm going to do is not contribute to it. But you have to be a kind human being for you, not because you want to make a change in somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, it's this it's back to sort of the old slanders, right? The idea of the altruistic human being as a person who does nothing for themselves and everything for everyone else, right? Which is not even close to a sustainable way to be a human being, right? And so if you're told that that's the only way to be this great good person, then that is a really good way to cut you off from aspiring.
I totally agree, actually. And I think about that all the time. Like, I think about what kind of life I want for my daughter and how happy I want her to be and what things I want her to achieve and accomplish. And I'm like, and that always starts with me being like, okay, so what am I doing to like set myself up to foster that? Like, how am I making myself a happy person so that I can lend myself to her being happy? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because if you could spend your whole life trying to make her be happy while being miserable yourself because you never put a darn bit of effort into yourself,
Totally.
and all you would do is make her miserable in a different way than the way that you were set up to be miserable.
Absolutely. I think about that all the time. Like, I owe it to her for me to be happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. So, and that's, you know, the work starts as close to home as you can get, and that's you.
Yeah.
You can't condition kindness on other people responding to your kindness in a certain way. You just have to make the choice for yourself, because being a kind human being is just nicer. It's more pleasant. And that's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. You know, you hear about these, you know, sort of sainted human beings, and the narrative is always that they're so selfless. And I'm just kind of looking at that going, nah. They're having a great fucking time over there.
Yeah.
I know that that's a pleasant way to be human.
Yeah.
Right? It's a bonus that everybody thinks that they're super nice and great and whatnot, but that's not the motivation, right? The motivation is, this is just intrinsically rewarding, right? If somebody's suffering and I can do something to alleviate that suffering, the feeling that I get from that experience is more rewarding than any other feeling that I've known.
Totally. That's why people go into health professions.
So, you can do it for yourself. You can be generous and kind and ultimately altruistic for completely self-motivated reasons, and you should. And you should never feel guilty about the fact that the reason I'm doing this is because it makes a better life for me, because that's where we have to start for it to be sustainable. Anyway, that's just about that.